The drums slowed, their rhythm shifting into something ancient, older than the village itself. A call to attention, a call to witness. From a northern road came the rising thunder of hooves, steady and loud, echoing like the beating of war drums against the valley walls. The wind whipped dust into the air, swirling it into a faint brown mist. Children stopped their running and clung to their mothers. Elders lifted their walking sticks slightly from the earth, as though bracing for the unknown. Papa Yuk stood slowly, leaning on his carved staff. His breath was steady, but there was something deep behind his eyes, an old knowing that storms did not always announce themselves in clouds. Oluchi watched the path, her pulse slow but heavy. The memory of spirits had carved a quiet strength inside her. She did not tremble. Chidabem moved closer, still holding the beaded sash, though now his hand rested near the hunting knife tied at his waist. Not a gesture of war, just readiness. Amarachi stepped beside Oluchi, their shoulders almost touching. Neither spoke. The first rider broke through the dust. A tall man astride a dark brown horse, his cloak woven of rough cloth, his hair bound in narrow braids that fell to his shoulders. His skin was dark like the earth after rain. Around his neck hung beads carved with signs not from a guitar. Behind him, 4 men followed on horseback, and behind them, more still, men walking with travel packs, spears strapped across their backs. They were not traders. They were not raiders. They were something else. The lead rider slowed as he reached the festival grounds, raising one hand in a gesture of peace. The horse snorted and pawed the earth, but did not charge. The man's eyes swept the square, calm but sharp, evaluating the shape of the villagers, the mood of their silence, the strength of their gathering. Then his gaze found Papa Yuk. He dismounted with a fluid ease, landing lightly on the ground. Dust settled around his feet. He pressed his right fist over his chest and bowed his head. "Peace upon this land," he said, his voice deep and even. "Peace upon its elders. Peace upon the spirits that guard its boundaries." Elder Okoro stepped forward carefully. "Peace upon you also, traveler," he replied. "Speak your name and speak your purpose." The man lifted his gaze. "My name is Oketchi," he said, "son of Nadazi, from the kingdom of Onyamiri beyond the hills. I come with my kin in search of passage and aid." A murmur rippled through the villagers. Onyamiri was a name known, but distant, spoken in stories of trade routes and old alliances, but rarely seen at the village boundaries. Papa Yuk stepped closer. "You arrive with many men," he said, voice low. "This is unusual for travelers seeking only passage." Oketchi nodded slowly. "It is unusual," he agreed, "but we travel not by choice. Our home suffers famine after the river we depend upon changed its course. The land dries, the wells sink, the yams shrivel in the ground. The drums of hunger beat louder than the drums of festival." He paused, letting his words settle like dust. "We seek a place to plant, a place to live, a place to survive." Now the silence was not fear. It was awareness, the weight of decision. Amarachi felt the shift in the air, as though something unseen had leaned in to listen. The elders gathered in quiet whispers. Chidabem's jaw tightened. He knew what famine could make men become. Oluchi's gaze never left Oketchi. There was a steadiness in him, a sense of someone shaped by hardship yet not broken by it. But the question was not of his character. The question was of fate. Elder Okoro turned to Papa Yuk. "It is your household that recently lifted the shadow of unrest," he said softly. "The path of peace begins where healing has taken root. You must speak, Yuk." Papa Yuk closed his eyes briefly. He saw Ngozi's laughter. He saw Ankum's tears. He saw his children, one forged by grief, one forged by grace. He opened his eyes. "Oketchi," he said, "we are not a land rich in abundance. Our own shares are measured carefully. If we welcome your people, you must work among us, not as strangers, but as members of the earth you till." Oketchi bowed his head. "That is all we seek," he said. The elders exchanged glances. Then the king's appointed messenger stepped forward, staff striking the earth once. With the consent of the elders and the blessing of the spirits, Aguta will host the travelers of Anyamiri, but they must abide by the laws of this land. A drumbeat rose from the musicians, slow first, then stronger like breath returning to lungs. The tension eased. The villagers exhaled, but Oluchi did not, because her eyes were not on Oketchi anymore. They were on the man behind him, a young warrior, younger than Oketchi, his face sharp like a carved blade. His gaze was restless, flicking from villager to villager, lingering longest on the women, on the layout of the homes, on the narrow paths that led to the forest and river. There was hunger in his stare, not hunger for food, hunger for territory, for dominance. And when his eyes met Oluchi's, she felt something cold coil at the base of her spine. This one brought something with him. Not famine, not desperation, something darker, something waiting for nightfall. New dwellings, new shadows. Over the next few days, the visitors settled in the unused far edges of the village, near the fallow fields and palm groves. They built huts, cut firewood, dug new yam ridges. The work was steady and efficient, and most of the men of Aguta welcomed them, sharing tools, sharing laughter, sharing palm wine under moonlight. But the young warrior, the one whose gaze cut like sharpened bone, remained separate. His name, they learned, was Obina. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his words carried an edge like cracked iron. Women avoided his path. Men watched him with careful eyes. And yet, every time Oluchi passed near the grove, she felt his gaze on her. Not desire, not admiration, recognition, as though he had seen her once before, in a place no river flows, in a time no song remembers. One evening, when the sun bled gold over the horizon, Oluchi fetched firewood from the grove. The air was quiet. Cicadas chattered in the trees. The smell of wood smoke drifted from distant hearths. She bent to tie her bundle. A twig snapped. She did not turn. She did not need to. I wondered, Obina's voice said, low behind her, how one carries spirits without being consumed. Oluchi rose slowly, firewood balanced on her hip. She faced him. The spirits walked with me because the living failed, she said. Obina smiled, not kindly. You speak like someone who believes suffering makes them chosen. Oluchi's eyes narrowed. And you speak like someone who thinks suffering makes them owed. His smile faded. The air between them tightened. Not with fear, but with a recognition that they stood at the edge of a river neither could yet see, but both were already being pulled toward. Obina stepped closer. Aguta is not ready for what follows, he murmured. Oluchi's grip on the firewood tightened. And you are the one bringing it. No, he said. I am only the first sign. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees like smoke dissolving into empty air. Oluchi stood alone, the evening wind winding gently through the leaves. She did not cry. She did not tremble. She simply whispered, to the earth, to the river, to the mango tree. Whatever comes, I will stand. And somewhere beyond the village, where the old spirits sleep beneath stone and root, something shifted, something stirred, something listened. The first heavy rains arrived 3 nights after Obina's words in the grove. Not the gentle, welcome rains of planting season, but rains that came like a pounding of war drums across the sky. Lightning cracked open the clouds. Thunder rolled like ancestral footsteps. People ran to secure grain. Mothers gathered sleeping children. Roofs of palm thatch rattled, water streaming down in long, silver ropes. Oluchi stood with Amarachi in their doorway, watching the storm hammer the land. The forest beyond the village flickered in white light, silhouettes of trees slanting and swaying like dancers possessed by spirits. The sky is angry tonight, Amarachi whispered. No, Oluchi replied softly. It is warning. They watched in silence. But on the far edge of the village, the area where the newcomers of Anyamiri had settled, no lanterns flickered, no voices called. They hung their shelters low, with shared fire pits, and now the rain pounded them mercilessly. But they did not cry out. They did not panic. They were used to storms. They did not fear the sky. When morning broke, the village emerged to a world washed clean. Mud glimmered dark and heavy underfoot. The river ran full, fast, breathing mist into the morning air. Papa Yuk gathered the elders beneath the Irako tree. Oketchi approached, his clothes damp from the night's rain, but his expression steady. "We thank you," he said. "Your land shelters us. We will repay this hospitality." 2 baskets of smoked fish were placed before the elders. The village murmured with approval. Smoked fish was wealth, a gesture of sincerity. But while others admired the offering, Oluchi's eyes searched for Obina. She found him near the riverbank, standing alone, watching the current, as if waiting for something to rise from the depths. The river refuses rest. The river had always been the heartbeat of Agota. Mothers washed clothes there. Children learned to swim there. Lovers whispered beneath its whispering reeds. But now the river ran louder, like something beneath the surface was moving, restless. The fishermen noticed first. Their nets began to tear, not from logs or branches, but from something pulling against them with intent. Not brute force, purpose. The elders blamed the storm. The fishermen blamed the season. But Oluchi felt something else. One evening, she returned to the water's edge alone. The river glowed gold in the sinking sun. The reeds swayed softly. Her reflection shimmered. She knelt, dipping her fingers into the cool current. The water swirled around her skin, as though greeting her. Then, the water stilled, completely. Even the wind paused. A voice rose, not spoken aloud, but threaded into her thoughts like smoke through a doorway. The river does not rage without reason. Oluchi's breath caught. This voice she knew, the river woman, the spirit whose presence had walked beside her in the time of her grief, when the world had turned dark. Oluchi did not speak out loud. The spirit needed no sound. "Then tell me why," she thought. The voice hummed deep as the riverbed. 2 tribes have made home on one land. One comes seeking survival. The other brings memory of blood. Both cannot remain unless the earth is balanced. Oluchi's heart pounded. The visitors? Oketchi's people? The river whispered. They carry hunger. But hunger alone does not bring death. Then what does? The current darkened. The reeds flattened. The water churned. The one who stands apart. Obina. Oluchi opened her eyes, and the river returned to its natural flow. Her hands trembled as she withdrew them from the water. Warnings without words. Oluchi returned to the village silently. The evening cook fires burned warm. Laughter drifted among the palm trees. No one saw danger. No one felt the shift. Except her. She found Chidabam sitting beneath the mango tree, sharpening a small carving knife, though he was not carving anything. Just thinking. He looked up when she approached. "There is something you wish to say," he said. Oluchi nodded. "There is a man among the newcomers. Obina. He brings something with him. Something that does not belong to this village." Chidabam's jaw tightened slightly, not in doubt, but in recognition. "I have seen how he watches the village," he admitted. "Not like one seeking a home, but like one measuring a battlefield." They sat beside one another in the fading light. "We should tell Papa," Oluchi said. "We should," Chidabam replied. But neither moved, because something held them still. Not fear, the understanding that once spoken. Words do not return to silence. The night of shadows. That night, the drums began again, not for celebration, but for the weaving of stories and songs. A circle formed in the square. Fire crackled. Elders spoke of the days before the ancestors crossed the red earth. Oketchi and many of his men joined the circle, listening respectfully. But Obina stood apart, leaning against a tree, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded, watching. Oluchi felt the river's warning echo inside her bones. The firelight flickered across the villagers' faces. Shadows danced. Then, Obina's gaze lifted and locked with hers again. But this time, she did not look away. Not as challenge, not as defiance, but as acknowledgement. 2 paths had been set. 2 rivers now converged. And the land itself was watching. The final lines of the night. Papa Yuk rose from the circle, staff in hand. His voice carried across the square. "There will come a time when the land tests the hearts of those who walk it. When that time comes, let no one say they were unprepared." The drums fell silent. The air stilled. And in that silence, A low howl carried from a forest. Not human, not animal, something ancient. The fire dimmed. The night deepened. And somewhere beyond the riverbank, a presence stirred awake. The howl that echoed from the forest lingered like a thread of cold smoke in the night air. Conversations broke. Mothers pulled their children closer. The elders glanced at one another, not with confusion, but with recognition. They had heard such a sound before. A long time ago, before the oldest among them was born. Papa Yuk closed his eyes, his expression unreadable. Amarachi's hand found his arm, steadying him. Chidabem shifted his stance subtly, eyes scanning the tree line. But Obina smiled. A faint, sharp, knowing smile, as though the sound had been made for him, as though it answered him. Oluchi felt something tighten low in her stomach. Not fear, not yet, but the shape of it forming. The drums did not resume. The fire crackled softer, and slowly, one by one, people dispersed into the darkness of their homes. Yet nobody slept easily that night, not even the land. The morning that came too quietly. Morning arrived, but the village did not wake to the usual chorus of rooster calls, the chatter of cooking fires, or the laughter of children fetching water. Instead, the air felt thick, heavy, muted. Even the river sounded quieter, as though it held its breath. Oluchi walked to the stream with her calabash. Chidabem walked nearby, pretending coincidence, though their steps matched like travelers accustomed to one another. When they reached the riverbank, they stopped. Something new stood in the sand. Footprints. Large. Deep. Not made by human feet. Not by animal hooves. Something in between. Three-toed. Wide as a man's face. Pressed so deeply they almost seemed burned into the earth. Chidabem crouched slowly. These tracks were made hours ago, he murmured. Before sunrise. Oluchi's fingers tightened on the calabash. It came from the forest, she said softly. And it went. Chidabem traced the direction with his eyes. Toward the village. Neither moved. Neither breathed. A gathering of elders. By midday, the square filled again. The elders sat beneath the Irako tree. Oketchi and his people joined, quiet, respectful. The air vibrated with a tension that felt like thunder waiting behind clouds. Papa Yuk rose. There is something among us, he said plainly. Something old. Something that does not walk the land freely unless called. A murmur rippled. Eyes turned just for a moment toward Obina. He did not avert his gaze. Oketchi stepped forward. We have seen such footprints, he said slowly. In our old land, before the burning of our villages. A spirit of hunger. It is drawn to conflict, to wounds that have not healed. His voice tightened. To secrets that are not spoken. The elders exchanged a look. Oluchi's chest pricked with cold. A spirit that follows unspoken wounds. A spirit drawn to broken truth. She knew such things. She had lived such things. Just then, Obina stepped forward. He did not bow. He did not speak with courtesy. He simply entered the center of the circle, claiming space. If there is a spirit here, he said, voice low, then let us not fear it. Spirits are not always enemies. Some are guides. Some are protectors. Papa Yuk's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with caution. And some, he answered, are destroyers. Obina smiled again, that faint, dangerous curve of lips that suggested he knew much more than he spoke. Only if we deny what they reveal, he said. A silence followed that felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Nightfall at the riverbank. That evening, Oluchi could not stay indoors. The air pressed against her skin. The river called. She walked alone, but she sensed someone before she reached the water. Obina stood on the riverbank, staring into the current. His reflection rippled in the surface like something trying to break free of him. You should not be here alone, he said, without turning. Oluchi stopped several paces behind him. Nor should you, she answered. He exhaled, soft, almost a laugh. You look at me as though you already know what I am. Oluchi's voice did not shake. I know you brought something with you. Not with hands, not with intention, but with memory, with something unresolved. Obina turned then, and for the first time, she saw his eyes clearly. They were deep. They were tired. They held grief shaped into something sharp enough to wound the world. There's a beast that follows me, he said quietly. But it is not a creature of flesh. It is something born from what I did not bury. Oluchi's breath caught. He stepped closer, not threatening, only exposed. My brother died, he said, voice raw. Not from war, not from hunger, from betrayal. And I did nothing. His hands trembled. I should have protected him. I should have given him justice. But instead, I fled. And the spirit of vengeance followed me. The river moved as though listening. Oluchi spoke gently. You did not flee. You survived. Obina shook his head. No, I ran. And what follows me does not forgive the running. The wind shifted. The reeds bent. And the river whispered. He is not lying. Oluchi's heart ached. Not with pity, but with understanding. The spirit was not simply hunger. It was grief. Untended, unspoken, unburied. The same grief Oluchi had once carried. The kind that becomes a shadow with teeth. Obina met her eyes. If the beast comes to this village, he said, voice almost breaking, it will not come for you, or for the children, or for the elders. It will come for me. A long silence settled between them. Then Oluchi said, then we will face it. Obina stared at her. You would stand beside me? After everything? Oluchi nodded once. I know the cost of facing shadows alone. As the moon rose, Chidabim appeared from the trees, silent, steady, having followed, watching, listening. Not in jealousy, not in suspicion, but in protection. He stepped to Oluchi's side, shoulder to shoulder. If there's a beast, he said, we face it together. Obina looked at them both. And for the first time, he did not smile. He bowed his head, as though something heavy had finally been allowed to fall. The moon rose high, silver, full, bright. Its reflection shimmered in the river. The water stirred. The air thickened. Something vast began to move, just beyond the edge of sight. Not arriving, awakening. And the night held its breath. The moon rode high above Aguta, like a polished bone, white and cold against the night. Its light stretched across the river, rippling silver on the water's surface. The village slept uneasily, as though every dream was being stirred by unseen fingers. But three figures did not sleep. Oluchi, Chidabim, Obina. They remained by the riverbank, where mist curled at their ankles and the reeds whispered like restless spirits. No one spoke. They simply watched the water, as though waiting for it to speak first. Finally, Obina broke the silence. There is something you must understand, he began, his voice low and steady. What hunts me does not have a body. It does not bleed. It does not tire. Chidabim shifted his weight, but he did not interrupt. It was born the night my brother died. Obina continued. It rose not from the earth, but from me. My grief, my guilt, my silence. His hands were clenched at his sides, hard enough to turn the knuckles white. The more I refused to speak of him, the more it grew. Oluchi's eyes softened, not with forgiveness, but recognition. Pain like that she knew. We do not survive grief by burying it, she said softly. We survive it by naming it, by giving it voice. Obina nodded slowly. That is why it has followed me so far, he said, because I never spoke his name again. I left him behind as though he had never existed. The river darkened in its flow. The reeds stopped moving. The night stilled. Chidabim understood before he spoke. You need to speak his name, he said. Say it. Let the earth hear it. Obina's throat worked, as though the word had claws. He tried, but nothing came. The silence choked him. The mist thickened. A cold wind slid across the river surface. The water rippled, not from current, but from presence. Something was rising, something that had waited too long. The first sign, a low growl began, not from the forest, not from the earth, but from everywhere. It vibrated through bone, through breath, through memory. The river surged upward in a sudden swell, water spraying into the air like a beast shaking itself awake. Chidabim stepped between Oluchi and the water on instinct, his body a shield. But Oluchi laid a hand on his arm. No, she whispered. You cannot fight what we cannot touch. The growl deepened. Shapes began to form in the mist. Not animal, not man. Something stitched from sorrow and rage. Eyes appeared first, dark, hollow, endless. Then a shape like a rib cage made of shadow. And behind it, a face, not monstrous, human, a young man's face, but twisted by abandonment. Chidabem's breath tightened. Oluchi's heart squeezed. Obinna fell to his knees. "Brother," he whispered. The figure in the mist trembled. The growl weakened. The shape flickered. Recognition had power. Oluchi stepped forward, not afraid. "Speak his name," she said, gentle as river water smoothing stone. "Call him back. Call him home." Obinna's shoulders shook. His voice broke like a branch under weight. His name was Kalechi. The mist shuddered. The hollow eyes softened, and the growl turned to something else. A sound like crying. The unraveling of shadow. The mist swirled around Obinna, lifting his clothing, his hair, wrapping around him like arms once familiar. He bowed his head, grief pouring from him in heavy, heaving breaths. "I left you," he choked. "I ran. I cannot bear it. I cannot bury you. I cannot carry you." And I told myself silence was strength. The mist flickered, then grew brighter. Oluchi stepped forward. "Love does not die when the body does," she said. "Only the living can bury the dead, and only the living can release them." Obinna closed his eyes. "I release you, Kalechi." The river stilled. The mist drew back. The shadow unraveled. Slowly, like a spirit exhaling for the first time in many seasons. The hollow shape dissolved back into the night air, and the river flowed smooth again. When quiet finally came, Obinna remained kneeling, chest shaking with silent tears. Chidabem rested a steady hand on his shoulder. No words were needed. Oluchi looked at the river, and the river looked back. A voice, soft as wind through reeds, came to her alone. "You have learned." She bowed her head once in understanding. Not worship, recognition. The night was no longer heavy. It breathed again. In the days after, the village changed. Not all at once. Not loudly, but like dawn spreading across mud walls and thatched roofs, warming a place that had grown cold without realizing it. Obinna began to help in the fields. He laughed, rarely but genuinely. He told stories of Kalechi, not of his death, but of his life. And slowly, the shadow faded from his eyes. The elders welcomed Oketchi's people not as guests, but as kin. Children played between the two communities, their laughter bridging what fear had once divided. The river flowed quietly. Peace, not perfect but real, settled on Oketchi. But all rivers continue forward. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange and wine red, Chidabem found Oluchi by the mango tree. She was standing barefoot in the dust, face lifted to the wind. Chidabem watched her for a moment before speaking. "You are not the same girl," he said softly. Oluchi smiled, not with innocence, but with truth. "No one remains unchanged after walking with the spirits," she replied. "But I am not lost anymore." Chidabem stepped closer, then walked the rest of the way with me. Oluchi turned to him, eyes warm, steady, strong. "I already am." The evening breeze carried their laughter into the trees. And somewhere in the river, unseen but felt, the spirit smiled. The season of planting began with the slow warming of earth, the soft hum of bees returning to wildflowers, and mornings filled with the sound of pestles striking yam in steady rhythm. Oketchi breathed easier now. The air itself felt different, lighter, unburdened. But peace, when it settles, does not arrive as a silent stillness. It changes the way people move. It changes the way they speak. It changes what they see in one another. And Oketchi was changing. The village rewoven. The newcomers from Oketchi's people built their homes not at the edge of the village anymore, but between and among the existing compounds. The children now spoke each other's names with familiarity, claiming friendships with the certainty of youth. Women taught recipes to women. Men taught fishing to men. Hands shared tools without hesitation. The market grew louder. The harvest fields grew fuller. The laughter around evening fires returned. But at the center of this new weaving of community was Oluchi. Though she did not seek leadership, People came to her naturally, not for decisions, but for calm, for clarity, for presence. The village had seen her walk through the dark and return. Such people are not followed with ceremony, but with quiet trust. Amarachi noticed it first. She carries the river in her now, she told Papa Yuk one evening. Steady but deep, soft but strong. She's becoming what the land needs. Papa Yuk nodded, though silence held something thoughtful in his eyes. Perhaps even destiny. A request from Oketchi. One afternoon, Oketchi approached Oluchi near the yam field. His face was gentle, though lined with years of hardship only recently eased. There is something I wish to ask of you, he said, bowing his head slightly. Not in obedience, but respect. Oluchi paused her work and faced him. Yes, our people have not yet held a naming of the land, he explained. A ceremony to acknowledge this soil as our home, not merely a place we stay. It is tradition. Without it, our spirits cannot settle. Oluchi listened, her heart steady. You want to perform it here, she said. If your people will allow. Oketchi nodded. Oluchi did not need to think long. This land is wide enough for all hearts that honor it. Relief washed over Oketchi's face. And there's one more thing, he said. The one who has walked both shadow and light should lead the invocation. The one who knows silence and the breaking of silence. Oluchi stilled. He meant her. At first, she felt an old echo, the old uncertainty that once lived inside her chest, but did not grip her now. It was only memory. I will lead it, she said simply. The promise settled like a seed placed in fertile earth. Preparing the ceremony. The naming of the land was not a ritual of drums or blood or offerings. It was gentle. It was about acknowledgement, a conversation between human hands and living soil. Women plaited fresh palm fronds. Children gathered white river stones. Men carried gourds of clean water to the square. And Oluchi prepared in her own way. Not with chants, not with special cloth, not with sacred powders. She simply walked across the fields, along the stream, into the forest shade, over the hill that overlooked the village. She greeted every place with her feet. She listened to the earth with her breathing. And when she returned, her heart felt full, not of power, but of belonging. The ceremony begins. At dusk, the village gathered in the open square. The sky glowed amber and rose. Smoke from cook fires drifted in soft ribbons overhead. Oketchi's people stood united, hands joined. Agutá people stood around them, not apart but surrounding, supporting. Papa Yuk stepped forward. Tonight, he said, we join stories, we join futures, and we offer the earth not our force, but our gratitude. He stepped back, and the square fell quiet. Oluchi stepped into the center. The silence was deep, not empty, sacred. She placed one hand upon the earth and spoke, soft but strong. This land has seen sorrow. It has seen hunger. It has witnessed grief and silence. The wind brushed gently across the gathering. But this land is not only memory. It is promise. She lifted her gaze. We do not come to claim it. We come to honor it. She gestured for the gourds of water. Children stepped forward, the youngest of each community, holding them carefully. Water was poured into the soil. Slow, steady, purposeful. This water is not to tame, Oluchi continued, but to nourish. To remind us that all roots drink from the same river below. People breathe together, slow and deep. Oluchi smiled, small, steady. May we grow here. May we heal here. May we remember we are not separate. A ripple of warm wind passed over the crowd, like a sigh of approval. The earth had listened and answered when the drums returned. Only then did the drums begin, not for war, not for mourning, but for joy. Children danced first, then women, then men, then everyone together in one swirling, laughing, living circle. And in that circle, Oluchi and Chidabem found each other. He held her hand, not to pull, not to lead, but simply to share the moment. Their foreheads touched. No words, the kind of silence that is full, the kind that feels like home. Under the quiet stars. Later, when the celebration faded and the fires burned low, Oluchi sat alone beneath the mango tree. The moon hung above her, soft and steady. Footsteps approached. She did not need to look. She knew. Papa Yuk sat beside her, slow, old bones careful. You have walked far, he said. Oluchi nodded. And there is farther to walk, she replied. Papa Yuk smiled, not with pride, but with recognition. Some are born to see what others cannot, he said. Some are called by the river, not by choice, but by nature. Oluchi turned to him slowly. Papa, what is it you were saying? He exhaled, a deep, thoughtful breath. You are being prepared, he said, not to follow, to lead. The night deepened around them, and the future opened, quietly, not threatening, just waiting.